This is Brian Foster on Kardec Radio, presenting the program Spiritism and the Spirit World Around Us.
Hello, everybody. May 20th, 2018. Another lovely Sunday. We are all together streaming live on Kardec Radio Facebook page. Again, please tell your friends we are here every Sunday night, 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, all time zones in between and around the world. We are streaming from Kardec Radio, the Facebook page. And we are on Kardec Radio, the app. You can download the app on your Android or iOS Apple device. It's free. Go to the App Store or the Play Store. Just put in Kardec Radio, Kardec, and you can download for free. You can get Spiritist radio programs 24 hours a day. And then also tell your friends about Kardec Radio Facebook page. There are many other people talking on the Kardec Radio Facebook page, streaming live. And of course, their programs also go on to Kardec Radio. So it's a wonderful area. We can all gather and listen to Spiritism together. It's not easy. In the English-speaking world, there's not that many of us right now. There will be much more in the future. That has been foretold by Spiritism and has been foretold in this book. This is where it all starts. The Spirits book by Allan Kardec. He codified Spiritism in the 1850s. He was not a medium himself. Well, he was an inspiration medium. We all are inspirational mediums, but he was not a medium that talked directly to the spirit world. But he used many mediums throughout Europe. He asked them the same question, and he did not codify it in the Spirits book unless he got a similar answer from each medium who asked the same question. So he's a very scientific, very logical person. This is a book that just changed my life when I read this book. I read it on PDF. You can look for it on PDF. You can also go to my website, nwspiritism.com, and you can click on his picture in the upper right-hand corner. It'll take you to the EDICEI bookstore. Again, this is Allan Kardec. Let me show you the book once more time. Allan Kardec, the Spirits book. He's written other books you should read. The Gospel According to Spiritism, a great book. The Medium's book, Heaven and Hell, Genesis. So there's wonderful books. Now, what are we talking about today? Well, we're talking today is we're taking more information from this book that I wrote, Spirits in the Spirit Universe. Book 2 of Spiritism, the Spirit World Revealed to an Anglican Vicar. The Anglican Vicar was the Reverend Vale Owen. And what I did is he got his messages in the early 1900s, 1910, 1920, 1930s. And he talked to a various group of spirits. And I categorized everything he wrote in his books into different categories. And this what we're talking about tonight. And we did episode 1 last Sunday. Tonight we're doing episode 2. We're talking about exciting things. We're talking about free will, why diversity exists, because God gave us free will. And then if we have time, we'll get into what's real and what's not real about astrology and the way the planets work. The spirits have given us information about that. It's extremely interesting. So I want to thanks everybody for being here. And again, and to remind you again, we are on Kardec Radio. Please share this video, this Facebook the page when you're done. Also, I load this video onto my YouTube channel. You can find that NW Spiritism. You also can find a link to my YouTube channel on my blog, nwspiritism.com. Go on there, subscribe. I have all the videos I make on this program, and I also make little short 5 to 10 minute videos on different aspects of Spiritism. So please tell your friends. This is why we're here. We're here to present to everyone is and what it's all about. And it's extremely interesting because because the spirit world is telling us more and more about what is awaiting us when we pass on from this life. Spiritism tells us we are immortal souls. We go through life after life. Why are we on earth? It tells us why are we on earth. It tells us what heaven is like. It gives us a lot more tangible, actionable information. And this is really what is extremely exciting about Spiritism. It's really what we're reading is, not that the Bible and other religious texts are not actionable, but it just gives us more and more detail. And it tells us why good things happen to bad people, bad things happen to good people, why things happen to us. It's all for a reason. And the more you understand Spiritism, the more you can discern what's happening to you on earth, what you need to improve, where are you going, make your own action plan for your ascendancy into higher and higher levels of heaven. Now, let's get right to it. So, why didn't God just, if God wanted us all perfect, why didn't he just make us all perfect? And so let's talk about this for a second. So we are told that diversity exists in the animal kingdom because of the process of evolution. Diversity exists in our solar system and the universe in general because of natural laws that govern our environment. We are told that diversity happens because of organic progressions, happenstance, and a myriad of other factors, which, as of yet, are difficult to be quantified as to our current level of science. Now, all of this appears extremely logical on the surface, but there is an underlying reason why planets are formed differently, animals evolve along a certain path, and why some suns are hotter than others. This is because the universe wasn't just a random occurrence, a big bang without a reason. Our universe was created in a precise manner to unleash the creative ability of spirits who started out as young, immature spirits, just like us. That's what we are. Anybody on Earth, unless you're maybe on a mission, you're from an advanced planet here to help us. But people like me, we are young, immature spirits. Now, in our episode 1, we talked about how the universe was created by thought, and the original thought was by God. We did that last Sunday. But as creation persisted, other realms, galaxies, solar systems, et al., were formed by the minions of the divine intelligence. So the true underlying cause of diversity is revealed in the book Life Beyond the Veil, in the Lowlands of Heaven section. And this book was compiled in the 1920s, of course, and this is what I have taken his books and put in different categories of information in spirits and the spirit universe. So he talked to a spirit called Astral in the spirit world that introduces us to the foundation of why there is variety in our universe. Because after all, if God wanted us all to be perfect, right? Because that's what Spiritism says. Our goal is to become a perfect spirit, a pure spirit. Now, that could have been easy for God to make. He made everybody pure and perfect if we were all the same. But God wants diversity. He wants really good people, pure people in our loving and harmony and charity and fraternity. But he wants us all to be separate personalities. So it's just, the more you think about it, it is the most wonderful genius system imaginable. So this is what Astral said. And this is extremely interesting. The heavenly bodies are the expression in matter of ideas originating among those high in the heavenly spheres of creative power. They are all and each the effect of thoughts and impulses proceeding from those spheres. When a world is in the process of creation, those high beings are constantly energizing and projecting into forming matter their spiritual influence and, so to speak, character. So let me stop right there. When high spirits create us, part of their character is imbued in what they are creating. I'll go on. Thus, although the planets of your system are all conformable to one great scheme of unity, they are diverse in their individual characteristics. These characteristics answer to the characters of the great lords, in whose charge they severally are. Astronomers are correct when they say that certain of the elements which go to form the Earth are found, say, in Mars and Jupiter, and in the Sun itself. But they would err if they should say they are found in the same proportion or in similar combination. Every planet differs in scheme, which governs them as a system. What is here said of the units which go to make up the solar system may apply to the wider range of things. Considering the solar system as a unit, it is not identical either in composition of elements or to planetary constitution with other systems. Each differs from its fellows also. What is he telling us? This is just part of this amazing revelations. You'll read amazing revelations when you read the Spirit's book and in Genesis. But here is actually taking you to another level given to us by the Reverend Vale Owen in his conversation of spirits. And this is conversation with the Spirit Astral. What is he telling us? He's telling us the great lords are those spirits who have traveled up the long ladder of improvement. They, at one time or another, have experienced each of the stages of reincarnation on different types of planets. While we are only on the second stage, Earth is a planet of atonement where we pay for our past wrongs in order to learn to follow the path of love, charity, and fraternity. The great lords have traversed the entire reincarnation process to become pure spirits. No longer do they need to don a physical form like we do. The great lords know God in a way in which we are incapable of comprehending. Again, you'll see this also in the Spirit's book, is that in the Spirit's book, one of the first questions, who is God? How do you know God? And they said, you're not really capable of understanding. But and then they give a definition. But even in what read by the Reverend Vale, they say, even we don't really understand God at our stage. Even these higher spirits, to us, they look very high. To them, they say, well, we're not that high. There's many, on top of us. So it's all frame of reference, is it not? So God didn't create the universe to be a uniform structure with robot-like beings, all obediently following the same path and responding to the same stimuli in the exact manner. He knew that a universe without individual choice would have all of the variety of an ant colony. Hence, the supreme intelligence endowed us with free will. Now, there is a price to be paid for free will. Free will is the cause of all injustice and cruelty on earth. Now, let that sink in for a second. The reason why we are in a chaotic environment is because of free will. Each one of us has free will. We are allowed to discover for ourselves the pain and heartache that is caused by our wrongful deeds. This is the purpose of reincarnation. This is why we live in a planet of atonement, which is the equivalent of a middle or junior high school, where the main goal of the teachers and administrators is to get the unruly and hormonal teenagers past a tumultuous phase. Whereas for our vulnerable young, the transition period only lasts 2 to 3 years. For the collective human race, our track to acquire the necessary attitudes and skills to be civilized towards each other started around the rise of the first civilization and is continuing today. If one begins at the ancient Mesopotamian civilization around 6500 BC until today, it's a span of over 8,500 years. Although, that's just one epoch, right? Although we have been told that in previous earthly cultures, such as Atlantis, existed before and were destroyed due to the fact that the level of human race's technology outpaced their spirituality. So they mention Atlantis, Lemuria, and they say that it's happened other times before, things that we don't even know. So think of it. I don't know how many of us, probably I've been one, going through life after life for 50,000 years, still trying to get civilized. That's a heck of a long time. That's why we should all be patient. A cynic might very well say that our primary advancement is the ability to destroy each other more effectively, which is witty and true, right? But there's more. Where once there was no constraint on humanity towards each other, for example, the worldwide acceptance of slavery, torture, and wars, there's now consensus against such practices. We look at these things and we say, we haven't gotten any better. We're still horrible. No, but you have to look beyond one lifetime. There is an advancement. In our own field of vision, we see disaster around every corner. But upon reflection over hundreds of years, one could detect a slow, almost glacier pace forward. The spirit world tells us that the growth of mankind will not be a straight upward sloping line, but rather an upward spiral where great wars, catastrophes, and other cataclysmic events may seemingly hurl our progress back a step or two, but we are then positioned. Yes, we are then positioned to improve, right? We acquire the collective lessons that we so sorely require. And it's called Spiritism dissemination. Oh, let's see. Someone said that on the chat window. So An example of this is the Dark Ages, right? Rome was founded at the urging of the spirit world. The spirit Emmanuel, who was the spirit mentor and guide for the famous Brazilian medium Francisco, also called Chico C. Xavier, tells us in the book On the Way to the Light how the city of Rome was first settled. This is what Emmanuel told us. Tormented and vexed by repeated battles with the Gauls, the Etruscans decided to take up a new life, and guided indirectly by messengers from the invisible world, a large portion of them settled in the future Rome, which at that time was nothing but a village of simple, unprotected hovels. So during the Republican era of Roman history, it became a great power. The dominating authority of the entire Mediterranean Sea, the spirit world envisioned Rome growing by spreading the good practices and bringing a civilized aspect to their nearby nations. Regrettably, Rome's leaders tasted power. Emmanuel described what happened. Instead of extending its ties through education and harmony, it allowed itself to become captive to a host of aggressive and ambitious spirits, widening its influence in the world with the ballistas and catapults of its warriors. What does he say? The Romans had brought much advancement, the concept of the family, active citizen participation, the importance of education, honor and business dealing, the organizational structure of institutions, and in building infrastructure to the ancient world. The spirit world wished to save these gifts. Therefore, they attempted to rectify the errors of Rome with the coming of Christ during Augustus's reign. Regrettably, the advent of Christ and his followers could not right the ship. Emmanuel comments about the fall of Rome. This is what he said. The weakness and impotence of human beings did not allow them to understand that Christianity had been called to the role of government solely to educate the sentiments of those who are governed, preparing them to take enlightenment and fraternity to the other peoples on earth, who at the time were regarded as barbarians by the culture of the empire. So what follows the fall of Rome truly demonstrates the power of the spirit kingdom. Emmanuel reports the spiritual authorities under Christ's aegis renewed the educational processes of the European world, at the time just starting today's civilization, by calling all human beings to life in the field, so that by tilling and toiling in the soil and being in contact with nature, they could learn more effectively. So how many historians marvel at the fall of the great civilization and utter darkness, the loss of learning, medicine, and political systems? How could this happen? It was the mass re-education of an entire population required to bring Western civilization up to the next level. Where the Dark Ages may be seen as a huge leap backwards, it was necessary re-education for the millions of souls who had lived in the glory days of the expanding empire. They had to be brought back down to understanding that acquiring domination over others is not the path to love, fraternity, and charity, but the road to perdition. Thus, a civilization was destroyed, and out of its ruins, a new one created. The upward spiral was resumed with the advent of the Renaissance. This is how human history has gone over and over. We get to a certain level, and they know that it's not a good foundation for us to be able to then approach the plan of regeneration. They take us down a notch, create the foundation, make it stronger, and we go back up. This is where we are right now. Now, Spiritism tells us that we are on the cusp of becoming, and we are in the process now, actually, of becoming a planet of regeneration. It is felt that we have the technological advance and spiritual maturity somehow hidden in us. It's hard for us to see it as a collective humanity to be ready to really start working towards a plan of regeneration. Now, this will take decades and centuries, I believe. I don't know how long it will take. The timing is up to us. So now we talk about creation, and we were talking about diversity. And of course, diversity is for all of us to find our own way to create and modify and mold our character and personalities to become extremely powerful and create by thought, but at the same time, being loving and honest and charitable and fraternal for everybody. And it's not just, now when I talked earlier, it's not just the great lords who create. As God set the creation of the universe in motion, and the great lords utilized their creative powers to fashion solar systems and planets, of which Christ was one, there are lesser spiritual beings exercising their free will to flesh out the details. Astro explains the hierarchy of conception. And this is where you start to learn the spirit world. It's like, oh, we're kind of organized like that, right? There are people, CEOs that say, okay, I want you to work on on a project to create this, right? And then these people, they interpret what's said, and then they create that interpretation, and then people below them start working out how the tactics and strategy to fulfill what the CEO wanted, or the president of the company. It's the same way in the spirit world. So here's the hierarchy of conception. This is what Astral tells us. It issues in the individual mind of the chief lord of the particular system. Under him are other great lords who work in unison with his one governing idea. But these also have freedom in those things which are under their charge, and so on, downward to the minute things of creation, the flowers and trees and animals, and the formation of the face of the planet. It is on account of this latitude in creation and control that you have such diversity in detail. And because of the limit of restriction to the exercise of that free individuality, that you have the unity which you find interpenetrating every department and subdepartment of creation. So let's think about that. The Hindus believe in many gods, which may be close to the truth, for the great lords and even those under them are gods according to our frame of reference. They create, they fashion, they destroy to form their desires. Once again, it's not just their desires. They're working on a plan, but they are given leeway to undertake and perform what they need to do in order to reach the goal of that plan. Interestingly, Astral goes on to tell us about the cascading set of beings who are part of the process to develop and maintain life. From intelligent spirits who possess free will to living objects with robotic-like functionality in which parameters are given and their software is sophisticated enough to control the system assigned. Astral puts it in his own language, trying to convey the complexity of the system to Reverend G. Vale Owen in the 1920s level of technology. This is what he says. Under these supervisors, there are also myriads of lesser ministers of different grade downward until some of the lowest orders may scarcely be termed persons, for they merge into the lower species of life, which you may term sensory, as distinguishing from those who, like ourselves, are possessed not only of intelligence, but also of that independence and judgment, which we know as free will. So this complex picture, there's so much packed in that sentence, is that, it's not just a bunch of spirits like us humans with free will who are creating. We also then give parameters, and we give, you, and this is, or these are some sort of semi-intelligence, the ones that are not given free will, but they have intelligence within them that we give parameters, and they, they may regulate the sun. Who knows what they do. So a picture emerges of a system vaster than our most wild imagination that follows orders from on high, but is allowed room to improvise. This is what Spiritism is it's just so exciting. It's really exposing everything, how the spirit universe was created, and in turn our physical universe and as also other physical universes were created. It's a system which is supported by a massive set of auxiliary functionaries who come prepared to accomplish the menial and detailed tasks with minimal programming. Somehow it all works. Somehow bureaucracy doesn't grind the entire edifice to a halt. I believe our God-made universe survives and thrives throughout all eternity because free will is enshrined as its guiding principle. Unlike so many of our corporations and governments, where ego-driven leadership commands total authority and nothing is allowed without approval, our maker, the supreme intelligence, understands that to turn beings into automatons is to destroy them and eventually the organizations producing them. This is why we have uniqueness. Diversity is all around us. Asher gives a concrete example of the effect of an independent spirit guiding our formation. This is what he says. Now, a little more about the earth itself. Geologists tell how some of the rocks are alluvial and others igneous in formation and so on. But if you will carefully examine some of these, you will find that they also give off a certain vapor, or one might almost say magnetic influence. This is the effect of the original inspiration to them by those who formed them originally. And these characteristics are worthy of deeper study than they have hitherto received. The chemical composition has been more or less ascertained, but the more subtle influences proceeding from the ever-vibrating particles have been neglected. Yet, when it is remembered that no piece of rock or stone is still, but all its particles are in movement, orderly and constant, is only one step onward than to realize, in order that the movement be maintained, there must be present with some great force, and at the back of that force, a personality of which it is the expression. Think about that. Everything you see on earth, all nature, waterfalls, the mountains, the valleys, were created by some force. And they weren't just created statically. They were created to be like the whole human race, right? Is that we learn in spirals, we go up in spirals. They're created and they're put into a set of rules, which we see our science interprets as natural laws, to change and so forth. But they were all created first by thought by higher lords. The mark of the individual creator is like the signature on a painting. It's ever present in all things. Animal, vegetable, and mineral were all tagged by the great Lord and his or her team that carried out the designs. Our planet, our sky, our features, and the trajectory of our history is the result and ongoing desire of a great Lord or a combination of great lords who wished our environment into existence. Astral sums it up. This is what he says. The whole material creation is nothing in itself and by itself. It is but the expression on a lower plane of personalities on higher planes, the effect of which their wills are the causes. As the man leaves the imprint of his character on his work day by day, so these great creative lords and their ministers have left the impress of the personality on these material phenomena. We are all created by thought. We all live in this world, what we think is solid, right? The wall behind me, we think is solid. My head's solid, right? We are blessed, but these are all logical constructs. We are blessed to have as our creative Lord, Jesus Christ, who came to earth to turn the course of history, and is now, beginning in the 1850s, with the revelation of the doctrine of Spiritism, preparing humankind for the next leap forward. He and his ministers are directing and guiding us, allowing each individual spirit the opportunity to accumulate the lessons required so we may become part of the grand team to create, conjure, love, and embrace new creations and spirits. So I hope this helps give a feeling of really who we are, where we are, and why are we here. The things that we learn is just amazing. This is why what the Reverend G. Vale Owen gave to us in this book, Spirits in the Spirit Universe, and starting with Allan Kardec, is just so exciting because, the Old Testament says, at the beginning, there was Word, God created everything. And at that time, thousands of years ago, that's probably as much as you could explain to anybody. The spirit world gives us messages so that we can understand according to our culture, our technological progress, and our spiritual quotient at the time. So they're telling us more things that we can understand. Now, let's talk about another subject here, astrology. Because a lot of people, they really believe in astrology, right? That the planets change things. Well, again, Astral talked about this. He talked about the influence of planets upon us. There is reality behind this. Now, is it reality as far as other people go? No, and I'll explain this as we go on. So this is what he said. Astral said about the influence of planets upon us. Now, this is extremely interesting for those who are interested in astrology. Most people, it's amusing to many. Some people don't believe it at all, and some people believe it. But let me give you some background so you can, for yourself, decide how you want to approach it. This is what he said. He goes, yes, friend, there is, after all, something in the astrological idea, and perhaps your scientists do well to give it a wide berth, for it may not be much understood by and would probably be fraught with danger too, such as they who do not understand that spiritual power is spiritual power. It is real and tremendous, and every sphere of all these is reinforced or modified by the others. The study of these things should be approached with the utmost reverence and prayer, for these are realms where the angels of high estate go softly, and we of lesser estate look on and wonder about the sublimity of that being who unifies all this in himself, and who has no name that can be transmitted to us, who can only reach out after him a little way, and then our arm is shortened, who can only see a little way, and the light beyond is darkness by reason of its intensity. So There are concepts in what Astral told us that have to be explained in order to comprehend Astral's meaning. Even after one is introduced to the concept of overlapping, intersecting spiritual power, Astral, so think of the earth as a ball and with levels of spiritual power, concentric circles. And then, other planets all have their levels of concentric circles and sometimes they intersect, right? So even after one is introduced to the concept of overlapping and intersecting spiritual power, Astral lets us know that the understanding the state of God, being who unifies, lies beyond our, and to a lesser extent, his reach. Nevertheless, to begin to envision what Astral reveals about the influence of spiritual spheres upon our life, should allow us to all place our lives in different contexts. We are not on earth to be conceived, raised, and tossed out into the working world without a purpose. Not the dreams of our parents, nor the desires of our extended families, nor our own chaotic choices that we made in our early years are the primary drivers of our destiny. We are placed individually for a specific purpose, and we are pushed ahead collectively for a targeted destination. Now, think about that. But the position of the planets, stars, and galaxies do have an effect. So let's talk about what we think of astrology in the modern way. Now, astrology has its fans and its detractors. To its opponent, it's a scam, right? A method of fleecing gullible people out of the ready cash. Most have heard about the college study where each student was asked to supply their personal information so a complete astrological profile could be written. The next week, the professor handed out the results. He handed each student their own report, with their names on it. He asked for the students to silently read them and then comment on their precision. And most of the students were amazed at how accurate they were. Many were convinced that somehow their personal feelings and milestones in their life were correctly interpreted by reading the stars. But next, the professor asked each person to give their profile to the student in front of them, so each could read what the other thought was a revelation. To their astonishment, each paper was exactly the same. The profile was written general enough, but with hints of specificity that each student at first believed it was meant entirely for him or her. Now, granted, fooling college freshmen isn't that difficult a task, but the story gets at the crux of what the detractors despise about astrology. Generalities that could mean nothing and something, depending on each individual's interpretation. To the non-believers, astrology is a worthless diversion for empty heads. The accessibility of astrological advice in newspapers and magazines for the general public reinforces their opinion on a daily basis. On the other hand, there are personal stories of charts and forewarnings of great accuracy. I'll relate one told me by a friend. He's from India. Now, in India, it is customary for the family at the birth of a child to have an entire life chart created. At his birth, a chart was completed. As a typical boy growing up, he had no interest in it. As he grew older, he never even gave it a second thought. When he was married, his mother gave it to his wife. This whole astrological chart created at his birth, right, at request of his family. His wife read the entire tome and was astounded. It correctly foretold the year in which he broke his arm. It even properly foretold the very arm that was broken, plus the year of his marriage and other factors were uncannily accurate. It even foretells the year and manner of his death. But he told me his wife would not let him see that part. So how do you reconcile these two extremes? So I suggest we think of astrology the same way many do now about near-death experiences. For many years, they were dismissed as hallucinations caused by the temporary lack of oxygen to the brain or some other medical cause. Given the recent research that has eliminated each theory and proves that experiences persisted even after accepted clinical brain death occurred, one is left with the response that something did occur, although exactly what caused it is not currently provable by our standards. Doubters will still look for the material causation, and spiritists will sit back and know that the spirit world is interacting with some souls for a purpose that invariably entails a lesson given to assist the person to grow spiritually. So hence, while there certainly exists many who dabble in talking to spirits as a con game and a way to make a living out of the desire of peoples to speak to the departed, there's also a legitimate phenomenon taking place for those who have experienced it themselves and for those practitioners who speak to souls in the spirit world to generally help others know that we are on this earth for a purpose and we are connected to the world. Now, let's go back up talking about the spiritual zones. So the layers of the higher regions, the levels of heaven, is revealed in the book Life Beyond the Veil, right? So this book was psychographed in the early 1900s. And the astral, the spirit, educate really what it means to talk about the powers above us. So I'm going to get back in here to astrology, but let me give you some more background of what Astral said. This is what he said. When we said the powers watch over the world, we did not, of course, mean to localize these powers on one side of this planet, but to imply the all-enveloping watch which the heavenly powers keep about the sphere, which is called Earth. These powers are resident in zones of which the Earth itself is the center, and they lie in concentric circles around it, what I said earlier. He's going on, he said, the inferior zones are those near the planet's surface, that's where we are, and progress in power and glory as the distances increase. But yet, space must be enlarged in meaning, and when applied to these spheres, for distance is not the same obstructive sense to us as it has to you. So, Astral is expanding what Jesus told us in chapter 14, verse 2. Where he said, in my Father's house there are many rooms. If it were not so, would I have told you that I go to prepare a place for you? What did he mean? This is what amazing. Also amazing about the book Gospel According to Spiritism. Many things when I first read the Bible before I was a spiritist when I was younger, I don't really understand that. I was pretty dense with parables. This is really getting us to what these things actually mean. So heaven isn't just one enormous location, but a series of spheres, all which encapsulate all lower ones. Like the Russian doll, right? Whereby the larger doll holds all the others, with each higher level reserved for those who made the effort to ascend. And this is only the rings of heaven for those who have risen up from earth. Asher tells us what the rings around the earth mean to spirits. For instance, when I'm in the 10th of these zones, my cognizance is limited more or less by that 10th zone as to its outer or superior boundary. I may, on occasion, by permission, visit the 11th zone or even go higher, but residence in those higher zones is not permitted to me. On the other hand, the zones inferior to the 10th are not impossible for me. For the zone in which I dwell, being a sphere, includes within itself, even geometrically considered, all the 9 inferior spheres, so that we may, for the sake of clarity of understanding, say this: the earth is the center about which many spheres are, and enclosed in all those spheres, and the residents of earth life are potentially in touch with all those spheres, and actually so in ratio to their altitude spirituality considered. Spiritually, because these spheres are spiritual and not material. In essence, let me interpret this. In essence, we are our physical bodies are carefully watched over by higher spheres above us. Our thoughts, wishes, and prayers are analyzed and possibly acted upon by legions of workers whose job is to determine our progress during our trials on earth. But now consider the larger picture. Imagine the earth circling the sun, but much larger because you're looking at the spiritual spheres, right? Accompanying Earth as it revolves. Simultaneously, other planets of the solar system are also rotating with much larger footprints. Add the spheres that surround our solar system, and other solar systems revolve around hubs in our galaxy. You begin to get the idea of intersecting circles on a colossal basis. Astral tells us in his own words. This is what he says: but as you progress outward, you come into a more complicated state of affairs. For not the Earth only, but every planet in the solar system has its like complement of spiritual zones or spheres. So as you go farther and farther from the Earth, you come to a realm where the spheres of the Earth and the nearest planet interweave with each other. As every planet is served with like attendants, so the complication is multiplied. And you will begin to see that the study of spheres is not so simple as good people among you evidently think it to be, who demand from us information as to the meaning of this thing. Draw a diagram of the solar system with the sun at the center and the planets roughly in the respective places around him. Then begin with Earth and encircle him with, say, 100 circles. Do the same with Jupiter, Mars, Venus, and the others, and treat the sun in like manner. And you'll have a faint idea of our work in its absorbing interest, but profound depths of meaning, which who include in our studies that of the spheres of God. So Astral continues with explaining Vale Owen what applies to our system. Solar system applies to every other solar system. As to the question of how many spheres there are, Astral tells us that spirits on the 10th level do not know the answer and would have to greatly ascend before being able to come close to the number. Now, we finally arrive at the influence of other spheres from other bodies than the Earth. This is what Astral says. We have said that these spheres are spheres of spiritual power. Now, two worlds affect each other by means of that which your scientists name gravitation. Also, two spheres of spiritual power coming into contact cannot fail to act and counteract each on the other. Referring to your mental diagram of the solar system, you'll see that Earth is, of necessity, acted upon by a large number of spheres, and that the greater number of these are they which are those of the sun and other planets within our own solar system. So, what is he saying? Hence, the very fact that Earth comes into contact with the spiritual spheres of other planets means that in some manner we are affected by that influence. Just as gravity continually modifies the rotation of the Earth around the sun, we too are exposed to spiritual power, which could alter our own personal trajectories. Now, in the book Genesis, which is also called Genesis, Miracle and Predictions According to Spiritism, codified by Allan Kardec, with the experts of communications from other spirits, we are told by the spirit Arago how the human race progresses by revolutions, upheavals, that many span centuries, thus unseen by individuals, are nevertheless driven, wholly or partially, by planetary spiritual influences. This is what Arago said in the book Genesis. This is why it's just so exciting, this information from spirits, because it just gives you little hints. We're not told anything. We're looking at the spirit world through like a little keyhole. We just see shadows, but we're learning a lot more than we ever did. So this is what Arago said. Within a particular planetary system, all the bodies comprising it react upon one another. All physical influences are in solidarity, and there's not one of the effect that you designate as great disturbances that is not a consequence of the combination of influence within the entire system. I will state further that planetary systems react upon one another due to the nearness or distance that results from their orbital movement through the myriads of systems that compose our nebula. I will go even further and state that our nebula, which is like an archipelago in the immensity of space with its orbital movements through the myriads of nebulae, is subject to the influence of those it nears. Hence, nebulae react upon nebulae, and systems react upon systems, just as planets react upon planets, and the elements of each planet react upon another. Thus successively down to the atom. Hence, on each world, there are local or widespread revolutions that do not appear to be disturbances, because the brevity of life only allows perception of partial effects. So I'll use the quote I discussed from chapter 42 from Arago, who describes how the spiritual waves changes our point of view, although we still retain our free will. This is what he says. Unconscious, at first, this turmoil, which is nothing more than a vague desire, indefinable yearning for something better, a need for a change, is expressed through silent agitation and then through actions that prepare social revolutions, which, believe it or not, also have their own lifespan, similar to physical revolutions, because everything is connected. If your spirit sight were not limited by the veil of matter, you would see these fluidic currents, which, like thousands of conductor wires, link up things of the spirit world and the physical world. So, unbeknownst to the billions of people on Earth, there are great invisible forces entering our consciousness, which causes many to think previous positions, to no longer accept what has been tolerated for decades, but to strive for something new. And this alignment and proximity of planets and solar system have a hand in gradual movement of a culture to a new aspiration, like the course change of an immense tanker, which slowly veers to a new direction. The hand of the spirit, so force, guides us onto an alternate path. No, and all this is constantly changing. Now, of course, it changes, within our little lifetimes. The change is very gradual, right? So as everything else on our planet and the universe, all is in constant motion. A star planet just doesn't hover over us, shining its rays of spiritual power to spur us in a certain direction. The mix and type of influence is continuously, imperceptibly shifting, modifying the thought waves entering our brain. Now I'll come back to astral. But first, before I come back to astral, now look, notice what was written in the 1850s by Allan Kardec, or codified, is then further explained by spirits talking to the Reverend Vale Owen 70 years later. This is how Spiritism is going to continually bring us more and more information. You should not consider, like the Spirits book, like, many consider, the New Old Testament, New Testament, to be the Word of God. That's the way it is. It never changes. Spiritism tells us no. The messages of love and charity and fraternity are everlasting, but we'll always update you. This is why it's dynamic, right? We get messages to Allan Kardec, we get messages to Reverend G. Vale Owen, Chico Xavier, Devaldo Franco, others, Yvonne Pierre. So just wanted to put that in there. We are always getting more information in the spirit world, and we're getting information as we are ready. So now Astro explains the effect of this process of spheres going around and influencing us. This is what he says. Still concerning the solar system, we say that on considering what we've already said, you will see that we have not yet mentioned all the complications which enter into the study of these spheres. For not alone do the concentric circles of zones about all the planets and the sun commingle with all the rest, but also the relative combination is constantly changing with the changing positions of these bodies and their consequent proximity to or distance from one another. So that it is quite literally correct to say that during no 2 seconds of time is the influence from them impinging on the surface of the earth the same, nor is any combination of their influences identical in its effect or intensity all over the earth at the same time, but difference in different localities. There must be further taken account into our calculations the stream of radiation coming to the solar system from the systems of other stars. All these things have to be reckoned in. For bear still in mind that we are speaking of zones and spheres of spiritual beings whose powers are energizing continuously and whose wakefulness never fails. So, what's he saying? Given the complexity of calculating the dominating influence of any one planet or star upon an individual, the ability to precisely chart the effects of the planets upon our future is really beyond our current capability. So while astrology may have correctly guessed at the effect of a planet, the actual spiritual radiations bombarding us are of a much more complex nature. On a broad basis, I venture to say that astrology can predict the future like the weather stations of 70 years ago could. Sometimes they're partially accurate, and other times not even in the ballpark. Only with the advent of supercomputers and intricate modeling of literally thousands and thousands of factors is forecasting the weather becoming more reliable. So at the end of the day, do I believe in astrology? I am certain that we are influenced by planetary and by larger systemic celestial positions. And this was told us all the way from Allan Kardec to the Reverend G. Vale Owen, and also astrology has been around a long time. I am now convinced how astrological charts correctly map personal destinies. I surmise, hence I'm only putting forth my theory, that some particular gifted astrologers are also mediums who intuitively read and interpret planetary data correctly when it comes to individuals or even possibly entire nations concerning their destiny. Through their own connections and sense of spiritual and planetary influences, gifted astrologers with assistance from helpful spirits could be able to peer into the future and discern where the waves of individual forces could push us. Above all else, whatever challenges come into our path, remember, we still have free will to determine our choice of action and our grace in the middle of turmoil. So that is my particular thesis about astrology, is that there is some truth to it. Planets do influence us. Now, can we with charts everything correctly know everything? Like from my friend from India, where they knew when he was going to break his arm, what arm he was going to break, when he was going to get married, all that. No, I believe that was done. That astrologer also had some sort of mediumistic, maybe unknown to that person, that man or woman, but it was there that helped him interpret what he or she saw. So that I will end there as far as our tonight, which I think should be very interesting to everybody. And I hope this was good. Please, if you can, share this live stream when I'm done. Share it to other people on Facebook. Tell people about nwspiritism.com. Share things on other Facebook pages. Go to YouTube. Tell people about the channels on YouTube I have on NW Spiritism. Also tell people about Kardec Radio, which is wonderful. It's with all the people in Kardec Radio, and I think Vanessa Anceloni's been one of the great movers, shakers of what we're doing here in the English-speaking world. It's amazing that we're getting more and more people listening to us. We're getting spread throughout the planet. Even on this program, I get people from all around the world. It's just so nice to have people listen to us. So I want to thank everybody for coming tonight and listening to us. And I just wanted to say, everybody, please read about Spiritism. Help other people when you can. Be an example to everyone around us. And God bless everybody. I'll put the end credits on now. Thank you.
I would like to thank everyone for listening to our program on Kardec Radio, and to point you in the direction to find more information about the spirit world around us. You can visit my blog at www.nwspiritism.com, and that is www.nw as in Northwest Spiritism.com. And if you are ever in the Northwest, I certainly would welcome to have you come to our meeting on Bainbridge Island near Seattle in the state of Washington. Many blessings to all of you, and please continue to explore Spiritism and the spirit world around us.